This is the piano sound from Icarus by Tony An, and I'm gonna show you how I copied the piano sound using only 3 basic free plugins, so you can do it as well. I'm gonna show you a bit of my process, so let's get into it. So let's start by hearing what we're going to end up with. So I'm in Logic here, and at the bottom I have my final result, and above here is the original Tony An. So let's listen to them together and compare what we will end up with. Okay, pretty similar, am I right? Maybe a tiny bit of volume difference, but overall it's very, very close. So this is what we're going to end up with, and I'm going to show you the chain I have, which plugins to use and which settings to use, and it will end up sounding like this. So first of all, a shout out to this user, Sahu X7G. Who tipped me on this track and also mentioned that it might be using the Labs soft piano. So thank you for the comment, and I hope you are happy with what I did here. So let me get started by showing you in Logic how I got started with this project. I downloaded the original track by Tony An. And usually when I start these projects, I like to try to isolate a part of a note or a single short part where I can listen to the quality of the piano sound and the reverb. So luckily in this project, it begins with a few single piano notes like this. Okay, so that's easy to cut out and use as a reference. And also at the end of the song, it ends with some very few short notes. And one at the end there. What I did was cut out the notes at the beginning and the notes at the end. And that allowed me to do something like this, where I have these here at the end. So I cut out the last note and then increased the volume of it a bit so I could see the waveform here. So if we listen to this, okay. And what I would do is just listen over and over again to this part. Just hear, like, what does the attack sound like and what does the reverb sound like. And for this particular one, I could sort of hear what I would describe as something like metallic shimmer. Not a typical Valhalla Supermassive reverb maybe, but yeah, I'm not sure how to describe it. I'm not an expert on reverbs and how to describe the different types, but I sort of could hear that, okay, this is something recognizable or very characteristic, so I was trying to at least find something that sounded like that. Okay, and you can hear it does ring out pretty long. Okay, so that gave me a sort of an idea for maybe the length of the reverb and how it should sound striking just one key. Then I also used a tool called Acon Deverberate 3 from Acon Digital. This is just the trial version. And what that does is it allows you to play around with some settings to try to separate the reverb from the dry signal. So if we listen to, this one is on now. No, it's not. Let's enable this track. Okay, so now it's supposed to show me the dry signal, just the piano, and then if I listen to the difference, it's what I've taken away. So this one, this tool sort of tries to take away the reverb, and then you can listen to only what's taken away, i.e. the reverb only. Okay, and if you do this, now you can hear a lot more of that, what I call metallic, or maybe like a stone room kind of chamber-ish. When it hits there, that sort of effect. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's there, and that's what I'm gonna remember and try to replicate, right? And I can also listen to just a dry piano and get a sense for how that should also sound like. This is not perfect, because if you combine, so I bounced out those two versions, just the dry and the wet, and if you listen to it together, it's not exactly the same as the original, so I can't trust this 100%. It's just an indicator. But that's just to show you a bit of how I try to approach this and use some tools to try to dissect it and get a sense of what is the original sort of sounds here before all of the effects are added on top of it. So with that, I got started using Labs, because that's what I had gotten the tip that it could be. So let's have a look at that. Okay, I'm in my first track here using Splice Instrument and Labs Soft Piano, which I've used in many of my previous videos, so you'll find information about that in other videos, and I'll link down in the description for where you can get this plugin. For the settings here, I put dynamics on 0 and reverb at 0.16. I started with 0 reverb actually, and tried to add only reverb using Valhalla afterwards, but after fiddling a bit, I ended up with having just a little bit of this reverb setting in here as well. Then I added all these notes actually manually from watching the piano tutorial video of Icarus by Tony Ann, and I just manually watched it and placed each note as it should be. And I also used the tempo mapping feature in Logic here, this smart tempo, to place all of the downbeats exactly, and that allows me to place all of these MIDI notes exactly on each bar where they should be. So that helps with matching up the audio, so that each note strikes the same place as the original audio, which again helps me to compare better when it sounds correct or not. So I did that, entered all of the notes, and used the Splice Instrument. And let me just disable this EQ first, and let's listen to only this track alone. So just Splice Instrument, dry with a little bit of reverb, and that sounds like this. Okay, and that's basically it for the first step, except that I have a EQ here, just dipping the highs a little bit, nothing fancy. We can listen with and without. So this is with, and let me bypass. You'll also notice there's an out gain here, so this one increases the volume overall by 8.7. Yeah, and you can see these settings here for this one, 0.22, 186 Hertz, negative 0.6 dB here, and for this one, 0.42, 4 kilohertz, negative 2.6 dB. So you can copy these settings using TDR Nova. Link will be in down below. This is the EQ plugin I'm using in most of my videos because it's free. It's available across all of the DAWs that people use. So it's a very convenient one, and it has amazingly great features, and yeah, it's really good. So recommend that one. So that's it for track number 1. So for track number 2 here, I have some reverb. And what I did was, since I'm in Logic, there's a feature where you can copy over the MIDI. Like I could do this, now I have a copy, but if I go and change this MIDI here, then it won't change the other one. But if I hold down Shift and Alt and move it, there is a copy. So if I change the notes up in here, it will also be reflected down here. And that just helps overall. If I do minor tweaks and I want the exact same MIDI notes for this track, that helps. But you don't have to do it like that. You could also just copy it and have to duplicate it like this. Or if you're familiar in your DAW, use some tricks with buses or sending the same MIDI signal in a different way. That's up to you. The point is I have a separate track with the same MIDI notes, the left and right hand here, and I'm going to have separate setting for the splice instrument here. Okay, so I have another instrument, another instance of splice here, with reverb set to as much as, is it 60 or something? It's not really responding for me right now. Let's see, let me restart that one. Here we go, 0.54 for the reverb and 0 on dynamics as well. And I have, let's listen just to the splice reverb first. So it sounds like this. Okay, it's not a lot of reverb, but it's enough, it's there. And then I did actually experiment with Valhalla Supermassive Reverb first, as I usually like to use that one. And with my experimentation with Gibran Alcacer, it's proven useful to recreate a lot of the sounds. But I tried to feel around to get this like the chamber, stone wall, or metallic room kind of vibe we discussed earlier. But I just couldn't do it. And so I thought, okay, let's just try something crazy, try a different reverb plugin just to compare something. And luckily I have one that's also free and that I haven't used much, and it's very, very simple, called Kilohertz Reverb. And when I enabled that one, it immediately sounded pretty similar, and then I tweaked around with the settings a little bit. So let's listen to it with this one enabled. So I just fiddled around with the size and the mix and compared side by side with the original, like went back and forth and sort of landed on these settings. And then finally some EQing here to take away a bit of the low end. Also here I want to notice, or I want to note to you that when I started, I did a lot of fiddling. I used some match EQ in Logic, which is where you take the reference audio and the audio I have, and it will give you sort of a crazy complicated EQ curve to show you where you would have to mix to get it more similar. But I've experienced that sometimes I just need to simplify things and I don't need all of those complicated tweaks. So after a lot of fiddling, I ended up with just needing these 2 tweaks here on one EQ to get the effect I wanted. So I have a high pass here at 489, slope 6 dB, which you can see if I, now it's not responding again. Let me reopen it. Yeah, so that takes away the low end. And then we have a little modification here to get it a little bit more down in the middle at 0.40 for the Q, frequency 437, and then negative 2.5 dB. Also out gain here of 5.1, so note that one, and EQ gain is off. Let's listen with and without this one, so let's bypass it first. Okay, so a lot more boomy if we don't have this one, right? So just emphasize the high ends a bit more and take away the boominess in the lower end. I think it's a general case that you don't want maybe too much reverb on your bass part. It can get a lot of muddiness there, so that might be a tip overall. And with those two, we now have this sound together. Okay, and we can even compare that with the original, what we have so far. So I'll enable those, and then I can toggle back and forth here. Okay. So pretty close, but I noticed that I wasn't getting the amount of bass that I heard in the final original. So I decided to experiment with a separate bass track, and we're gonna have a look at that now. Okay, so for my bass track, this is what I did. I just played or placed the notes manually, just root notes, same as in the chords here. We can listen to just this one. Okay, it's nothing magic, it's just very simple, long sustained bass notes. Also using Splice instrument, so this is the third instance of Splice we're using. I keep calling it Splice, but I should say Lab Soft Piano. And this one, let me open it again. This one has 0 reverb and 0 dynamics. Okay, and I have added an EQ here as well. And let's listen to it without this one. Okay, so now you're getting the full piano key sound with the treble and the ringing of the note. But if I enable this, it becomes much more of a bass sound, right? So for the settings here, a low pass filter up here at 163 Hertz with 24 dB per octave. I also have an out gain of 4.4 dB. And this low pass, let me open it again, keeps getting unresponsive. Also have a gain of negative 5.5 here. Okay, so negative 5.5. And then undo. And then we have a simple bell curve here at 60 Hertz, 1.03 EQ, and negative 11.3 dB. Okay, so that's also very simple. Again, I did start out with a lot more of these curves and tweaks, but ended up with only needing these two. So that's pretty cool. And with that, we now have these three together. Let me just say we have a fourth step, and I just want to disable that before we listen to this together. because I have a mix here at the end, a small EQ. So let me just disable that one. And now let's listen to what we have with just these 3 tracks. Okay, that is pretty close. That's getting quite good right there. But I did sort of feel it wasn't entirely in place yet. And what I usually do many times during a process like this is use the Match EQ feature in Logic and try to get a sense of where am I missing things now. Is it missing something in the low end, high end, mids? Is it a difference in the stereo width, etc.? I also use the Span plugin a lot. Let me see if I have it here. This one. I can open it on the original. I will also link to this one in the description. It's a very nice EQ plugin, free. And it has a ton of options for different settings, depending on what you want to analyze. What I usually do is go down and see things like this. And you get a sense of like where are the peaks here, and then you can compare that with the sound you have, and you can sort of try to see where am I missing something. And in any case, what I saw and heard with my ears was that I wanted a bit more tweaks overall, so I added a final mix here. In Logic, what I do is route this with a bus. So for each track, they have like a bus out to bus 20 here for the send. So normally it will be a stereo output here. You'll see this. But if you just change that to bus 20, for instance, I've done that for all these tracks. That means they all end up here in this auxiliary track. And then you can add effects here that will impact all of these 3 together. So that acts sort of like a mastering chain, if you will. So what I've done here is add 3 adjustments. So basically a bit lower here around the low end, up in the mids or high mids, and then even lower on the real highs here. The settings that you can copy, if you see these, 338 here, 0.26, negative 3.4. For this one, 0.27, 1648 Hertz, 3.4 dB. And then finally at the end here, 0.31, 6.6 kilohertz, and negative 2.6 dB. So you should be able to copy these. And then we can listen to it with and without this one. So let me bypass. Might be difficult to hear if you're not having good earphones or things like that, or very good speakers in your room. Not sure if you will hear much of a difference on laptop speakers. But anyways, that's what I did to get sort of the final tweaks to get it closer to the original. And yeah, once we had that, I could bounce this out to a file. So let me do that. Bounce it. Okay, it's bounced, and then I can drag it in like this. So at the bottom here, that's our version. Final mixed. And now I can listen to these side by side like we did in the beginning. Alright, I think that was pretty close, and you should be able to do this yourself. I will also link to my templates that you can download and find on my Gumstore page as well. Links will be down below. And check out some of my other videos. Comment below if you have requests and things you want me to look at or show you. So I hope you like this. See you later.